When you become a gray, nobody knows what you're doing. It's to your advantage to know how to tell your story and make it distinct and truthful as early as you can, because you're just going to engage that audience no matter who you're in front of faster.
Welcome to the Growth by Creativity podcast, where we discuss the art of captivating storytelling, compelling design, and imaginative communication strategies through interviews and case studies with creative experts. Hope you enjoy and subscribe. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Angela, Senior Manager and Corp Comms at Augury, an industrial AI company for manufacturers. Previously, Angela ran a brand voice consultancy where she worked with founders and nonprofits to develop their business story. Angela has a background in theater, where her plays have been produced in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Asheville. She's currently working on her first nonfiction book, and she was also the producer and host of the And Then Suddenly podcast. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome, Angela. So I'm actually super excited because not only we're going to talk about something that's really, I think, relevant right now, especially with everything happening with AI and how do you differentiate your brand, et cetera, but also because we actually work together. So I think this is you're an extra special guest, so I think, this will be fun.
Yes, it's a full circle moment.
It's a full circle moment. So, Angela, recently we get asked a lot, we need to work on our brand voice. And so I actually wanted to speak to you about this. What is a brand voice?
To me, it's the verbal personality of a company. It's how that company talks. I come from a theater background, as you mentioned, so I approach it like a playwright. And to me, it's like that is, principles of sentence structure, verbs, how do you talk? And also relationship. Like those are those grammar tactics are really helpful, but it really is also like, who is your company to your audience and what do you want that relationship to be? It's also a very acting way of looking at it. Like when you do theater training, it's about, I am this character and everything I do in my action is because I want something. You have an objective and you want something from somebody else. And not that wants are bad. We all have wants. We wake up and we're just trying to get our wants on a daily basis. And so for me, brand voice is like, okay, so who is the personification of your company? Who are they to your audience? And what do you want? What kind of relationship do you want? And then the language principles reinforce that. So, and then it brings the personality and even more clarity in the tactics of communication. So it can be defined that you can jump off the page. I think definitely, now that everything lives on social media so heavily, and you notice this, like, I always show my team like the national parks, Instagram and Twitter. I love their social media person because they infuse so much personality into the company. And we expect that, like Wendy's is really good at this. I think we've all seen like screen grabs of the Wendy sass on Twitter. Like a person is brand voice to me.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, I know exactly what you're talking about with Wendy's. They're really good. So there's a lot to unpack here, right? There's several aspects within brand voice, it seems, right? Can you share an example, even if it's fictitious? Because you speak about several components, right? You said what they want and then the language. So is there an example? I mean, I know you mentioned Wendy's, but if there's we can break it down a bit, that might be interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, like Nike is always a good example of everything, right? And so their mission is like that everybody is an athlete. I don't know if that's verbatim, but that's basically what it is. So their language is action-oriented, inclusive. Like when I buy a Nike product, because of the language I see on their taglines and on their ads, I believe they are my trainer, my running partner, that they use adjectives and short sentences. Nike is not very verbose. So it's action oriented. It's in that world of activity. It is empowering in the verbs that they use. And so I believe Nike knows me. Like when I go on their site to purchase, I'm like, they get me. They know that I want to try to run this half and I need new tights. Another good example, which is really interesting actually, is the National Park Service in the US. You would assume when you go to their website, it's full of brown. It's full of the old design imagery that they have on all their signs at the front of the parks. Their feeds are full of beautiful scenic pictures, which you would expect. You would expect the Badlands and Yosemite, but it's sassy central on their text. It's like, this is a bear. Don't get too close to it. You'll die. By the way, bear mating season is happening. And here's all this information about bears. And when I looked at the site first, I was like, this is really bizarre. I would not assume. But then I went on a hiking trip and I looked around and I thought, yeah, they know their customers. We all tend to be like nature nerds, probably maybe more academic leaning, big readers, I would assume, for a lot of that population, and younger and older, but they do enjoy some cleverness. So I think that's a really interesting use case where they are expanding the potential of the brand in a very iconic old visual brand language. And I think they are a really interesting use case. So you have the really overt things like Nike, and then a sassy, interesting world where they're exploring brand voice with the National Park Service.
I love that. Yes, and I'll definitely. I haven't checked it out, so I
Oh,
definitely
you
will check
have
it out
to.
after.
It's a good laugh. I want to shake that person's hand. If you're out there, whoever's writing those things, find me on LinkedIn. I want to give you your flowers. They're amazing.
So, Angela, previous to Augury, you ran a consultancy actually doing this all
Yeah.
day, every day. From start to finish, can you walk us through what that process looks like and how you can become a more human brand through voice?
Yeah, so I would always start off with a general conversation about what like a founder thought their company was. And that usually got a little bit into the mission and vision, kind of wraps itself in. So I'm a company looking to do this for, like, let's say financial literacy for women, and I want them to feel empowered and like included in the education around these concepts. And then I would have them do their customer profiles, and they would be really specific. I would say, I want 5 real people, and I would give them these printouts where you have to name them. You have to say where they live, what they make, what is their job, what do they like to do, where do they go eat, what kind of media, like make them very real. And that could also vary. Like, let's say, like, that my ICP is a 25-year-old out of school, like recently out of school, starting their career. Also, I want to hit like the 45-year-old has to think more seriously about retirement, like in the financial example. So I'd have them really make their people real. And then I would ask the relationship. Are you their friend? Are you their educator? Are you on an equal playing field with them? Are you more elevated? Like, what do you want them to think of you? And then I would pull in my theater tricks, which is, I am, as a writer in my training, I hated cliched stories. I hate cliche. I never sat down and wrote a plot for a play before I wrote it, because I thought, well, I'm just going to come in with all these preconceived notions from the media that I've consumed. I want to be as generative and out of the box as possible. So what I would ask for is 5 images that felt like their company. That when they think of the tone of their company, I want 5, any image they can give me of what they think their company looks like, the feeling of the look. I wanted to be able to start the personification. So if someone sent me like a really sleek lady with black glasses, plus like a lot of like, someone who was wearing a lot of satin, and then like a textured wall full of feathers, I'm like, well, that's a there. Like, what is that? Versus like, one time I had someone who sent me just a bunch of punk rock images, like all these punk rockers from the 70s, lots of leather. And I'm like, well, that's a totally different way to speak. If I had to embody those images, I would talk totally differently than like the sleek land over here. So I would want to make it real in a tonal way. And then to double down on that, because I feel like unless you are a poet, it is really hard to describe tone, but music does it very well. So I would ask for 4 tracks that sounded like their company, that they felt embodied the spirit of it. And from that, I'd be able to identify, okay, this is the pace they're looking for. This is kind of probably the language they're being drawn to tempo in a way that's very vivid with that ask. And I would take all of those elements, the images, the music, the customer profiles, and their own testimony about what they think they're doing, and I would merge it together and then work with them on that. I'd be like, this is what my assumption is based on everything we just did. This is my assessment of your company. This is where I think your principles are going to lie. How does that resonate with you? Let's talk about it. Because if it's not true, then there's a disconnect in everything that you gave me. And then we need to talk more honestly about what you're doing and why and how to do it better. That was my process.
Wow. I absolutely love it, and I might steal it.
Do it. I mean, like, I don't know why people don't work with sound. I think that's a very artist way to think of sound as a true companion, but like bring in music, especially the music part, like music and image banks, image galleries is what we call them as writers. They're really useful in being able to grab a hold of a nebulous idea, like to bring it farther and farther down into reality.
I want to unpack this a little bit, because I think something that's been bit of a challenge in what we're seeing with some of the clients that we're working with is, should your brand voice reflect how you as a company aspire to be, or should it encompass how your audience perceives you based on feedback, on how they perceive your brand? Like, what angle should you take?
I think it's about what you perceive yourself to be, but then I think what you have to honestly ask yourself is, if there is a disconnect, why is it happening? Is it in the product market fit? Is it in your delivery style? Like, why are they not seeing that? Or maybe is it that you are not being specific enough as a persona, both in your design and in your language? Like, is that happening too? I think you have to look for where the fracture is happening. Because the thing with audiences and like customers is that the more specific a brand is, the more they'll get on board. When you become a gray, nobody knows what you're doing. And also there's this idea that the more specific you are, the more people you will get. Even if you're targeting an ICP, if you are recognizable, like, you will start to get other people into your orbit. So I think live up to your own principles, but then be honest about where your principles are failing in execution, and then fix those gaps so your audience can be like, yeah, that's you through and through.
I love that. That's a great point. When should this happen? A lot of our listeners are either founders or marketers at, B2B software companies, typically enterprise. Is this something you do in the beginning? Is this something that you do once you find product market fit? Is it something that you do ongoing? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Very beginning. The moment you have a website, you need this. Even I would say, like, I don't know, like, I'm not as I worked with some people on their early pitches for Seed A, and I'm not too knowledgeable about like when you start to look public. But even in those pitches, I think it's important because like humans are wired for story. The only thing we know how to communicate is stories. Even like when I tell you how I woke up this morning is a story that is a true dramatic structure no matter what. I woke up, I was tired, I had to convince myself to get out of bed. My cat was putting toys in the bed because he's a crazy little dude. And then I had to have 2 cups of coffee, and then I sat down and I'm going to get through the day. Like, we all go through this, like, everything was normal, and then this happened, and then I had to get through it, and here I am. And that is, you can call it hero journey, you can call it story brand, is a popular, it's how we're wired to tell stories. So it's to your advantage to know how to tell your story and make it distinct and truthful as early as you can, because you're just going to engage that audience no matter who you're in front of faster. So I think that also what's a struggle for founders, which makes total sense, is that especially if they're early stage, they are responsible for everything. They know everything about the idea, everything about the process. It's exhausting, it's stressful, it's exciting. Being able to define that universe a little bit more helps them focus and not feel like everything is on display all the time and they have so much information they don't know what to give you. Because again, they know too much about everything. And it just also helps be targeted, feel confident with the target, feel confident in saying things concisely. So as soon as you can, as soon as you know the change you want to make in the world through what product and who it's for, you should start thinking about voice.
It's funny that you mentioned this. It might be sort of derailing a little bit. I'll bring it back. But one of the big challenges we face is, typically a lot of the founders have an engineering background, and it's, they have all of this information in their head. And a big challenge that has come up is, I have it all in my head, I don't know how to get it out.
Yeah.
Would you say that having a brand voice process could be a good vehicle to somewhat extract that information?
Yeah, because it adds some objectivity, right? Like that when you go through a prompt of like, get 3 songs that feel like your thing, it puts in an objective lens where you can kind of detach a little bit and look back and be like, okay, so I built that thing. This is what I think the company's going to look like. What sound would I put with it? And it allows you to analyze the work that you're doing, I think in a helpful way where you can actually learn about your work and not go through a circle of like, well, I don't know how to describe my work. It's like, well, actually my work is bringing out this. So I think that's the quality there. And I think it helps.
Angela, in terms of, so you mentioned, as soon as you have a product, basically, get on with it, start with your brand voice. And so walk us a little bit more specifically, you share the pictures, your clients would share the photos, the soundtracks. Mm-hmm. What happens after they share sort of those initial assets with you? What happens next?
Well, I create with them a brand voice guide where I look at like, who is the character of your company? What is the relationship? How should they view you? Again, that friend, teacher aspect. Then I look at different tonal qualities, like, do you lean into poetry? Do you lean into short sentences? Is it action verbs? Is it, laborious verbs where they're like 3 syllables? Like what are we looking at, and give you some things. And then we do the mission and vision statement. Because to me, that is the DNA of the company, not only in what you want to do, but in your tone. And so being able to say it in words that are related to that, it just, again, like in this DNA sense, like use the right words in your mission and vision, use the right syntax, use the right pronouns. Is it we are building this together, or I am doing this for you? Like what are we doing there? And I would work with them on that. And so by the end, they'd get this guide, a clean mission and vision, and then they were able to start like implementing website design.
I love that. And especially given our relationship, I think it'd be interesting, to share a little bit how we work. Where you're the writing, we're the design. How do you bring this into the design aspect, the visual components? Can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, they should ricochet up against each other. I mean, like let's say if you say you're a sleek company and you're showing me images, and like let's say like in the example of the sleek one that I shared. So you share with me a bunch of sleek images, and I say, okay, you are supposed to have medium line sentences, adjectives are important. All of those qualities then should also go to design. Like, the design should be sleek. Maybe it's minimalistic in like the use of color. Maybe it has a vibrant streak everywhere. Like you have to decide what sleek is in that sense. And so in some ways they all become brand experience principles at the end of the day. Like when you're talking about tone and personality, that's directly related to design. I mean, if I say I'm a funky person, you're going to see it in my clothes. It's not just how I talk. So they should bounce off. They should be true. They should be harmonious, because you need to walk the talk with design.
How frequently should founders or marketing teams be revisiting their brand voice and guidelines? What would you say is best practice?
Kind of hard to say. I think it depends like where their company is, like how it develops. Do you get a new product offering that expands your vision and your mission? Do you realize what you did isn't working for some reason, and why is that? I guess I wouldn't recommend though, you have to be sensitive about it, right? Because it takes a while to build it. Like once you define your principles, then you have to go start building stuff. And it takes a while to figure out what is the right mix, what performed well. And so give it time to live before you decide this isn't right. And I think to make it shift, it has to be like a true growth period of some kind where you have grown out of those principles, you have evolved, and that there needs to be additions to it to reach your new mature state.
So in the case of Augury, for example, when was the last time you guys updated your brand voice guidelines?
About this time last year. Yeah. Because we had a new elevated mission and vision, and we used to be the machine health company. So we looked at machine reliability exclusively. And then our portfolio expanded to include, process optimization for manufacturers. And then that got wrapped into this vision of making all of production healthy, not just machines and processes. And when that went bigger, like we had to really define what a bigger Augury meant and do those principles. And then because also the company was bigger, we had more creatives working, then also create a guide that can unite everybody's work and inform everybody's work so everything is consistent. So yeah, last year.
And so, and previous to last year, when was the last time it was updated?
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
When they were
that's a good time.
Yeah, when they were focused on the machine health play and that strategy. Yeah, it's been a while.
Angela, sorry, hopping back into the previous topic about the synergy between copy and design. Really, what you're saying, best practice would be that design teams should be asking for brand voice guidelines before they start working, right?
Yeah, and I think all of those things should be included in the same brand book. I think when people think brand, obviously they think design first, and that makes sense. I mean, design is memorable. I think we remember designs much longer than we remember words, but they should be working in tandem. They need to be developed together, and they should then be expressed as principles at the same time, ideally.
Another question that just came up, just because we're talking about alignment between, copy and design, but you mentioned that you've worked with founders and you have that buy-in. But what happens when you're working at a bigger software company where having C-suite alignment or buy-in, because it is an abstract concept, right? Like you said, a lot of folks think, okay, brand, it's visual, make it nice and pretty, slap it on the website at the end. How do you educate C-suite and other stakeholders that have decision-making powers into brand voice and the importance of it?
I think being able to talk about qualities and relationship are really helpful. Like in the case of Augury, like when we went through the branding exercise, I was getting a lot of design principles, but not a lot of voice. And I was like, can I work with you guys and let's push it all forward. And so being able to say like, okay, I think Augury is a futuristic innovator who's trustworthy, and like being able to say like character qualities and character traits. And then I started asking them, if Augury walked in a room, what would they look like? And then it really made them understand, like that helped make it real for them. Like, oh, what would Augury look like if they walked in the room? Okay. And then like, okay, and then what's Augury's favorite song? What feels very Augury? And just giving them the ability to think of it that way, that really just helped. And that just made the buy-in happen, because then it was like, okay, so we talk in the following. And I don't know, everyone runs the gambit with creative comfortability, if you will. Some people are confident writers, some people can't write or don't like to write or think they write horribly. And so being able to then show an example of what that means. So if you're saying Augury walks in the room and they look like this, then this would be the following presentation title at a big event. Is that true or false? And like, then they can see the application and then see like, oh, that's what the language looks like if we do this and filter. So make it real and then show examples that are real. And I think you will get buy-in, because some people just aren't naturally creative thinkers, or actually we all are, but some people are confident in that ability, and making it real for them really helps.
And sort of following this buy-in thought process, what do you say when we're in a very competitive industry that the classic question is, when am I going to see the ROI of this? When am I going to see the return on investment? What do you suggest? Like, have you run into that question, and what do you answer?
No, I mean, it's really hard to answer that, because I think if you are a creative marketer, you are supplying the fuel that flies the plane, but someone else is flying the plane. Like, I create the social copy that the social media person implements and then marks and decides how to promote and do all of that. So like, my team's DNA is everywhere, but for us to step back and be like, this is the ROI, it's really tough. I think, for us, when we look for our own ROI, I want to know like, well, what post was engaged with the most and which one was the least? And I want to see both of those. Or what was the feedback from audience engagement on a webinar? I want to see that. And if we see that we're not getting the engagement we thought, let's take a look at why that is. I think having really clear creative guidelines allows for more creative audacity. And the more audacious and exciting and creative you can be in creating content, I think you will see an ROI. You really just have to be able to set the stage for more adventurous marketing. We know we're doing, like with the new voice, we've really like pushed the bounds on impressions and engagement than ever before. But I think that's a collaboration between, we have a really great social media person and then we have a really great brand voice and team that's implementing it. So it's hard to say as a solo team what we're actually doing.
Yeah, I know it's so important, but like you said, it's nebulous, and it's typically creativity. I would say nearly always it's a collaboration. It's multiple people specializing in different things coming together and creating magic, right?
Yeah.
Angela, I know we spoke about this offline, but I'd actually like to bring it online. How is AI affecting brand voice?
I was dreading this question.
I know.
It's so complicated. I can only speak for my team. I think there is a lot of promise in AI, but it's not for the creatives. I think AI is really good at brainstorming. I think it's really good for surfacing cliches. I mean, when I've experimented with Gen AI programs and I put in a prompt, it's taking from a known database, basically like all the internet's knowledge. I don't know how they're doing that, the machine learning on that, but I can instantly see, oh, this is what people commonly say. I want to stay away from that. And like it can be a really helpful writing assistant, at least for brand voice. Like when you want like verbs that sound like the following, go, and it can pull up 30 and you can start looking at those word choices, or you could start experimenting with, here is a line, I want it to sound like, that was an interesting prompt. I was trying to say like manufacturing workers in the Midwest one time. I was like, give me an email subject that would hit manufacturers in the Midwest, like someone who works at a plant, and it gave me the weirdest response. It's like I think all it did was put in like wrench emojis into the thing. I think the thing with brand voice is it's about humans communicating to humans. And I think the sincerity of that and the creative expression of that is not something AI can really do at the moment. And I don't want to think about what it happens when it does, because that makes me a little nervous. But I think if you want to explore brand voice examples, brand voice edits, get someone to riff for you and look at it and see what worked and what didn't. I think it could help you on that micro level of like, what does a good header look like? What are some verbs that are awesome? How would you rewrite this? And you can experiment with it. I think that's helpful, but I don't think it's shaping brand voice. I would actually say that, people who don't have a clear writing agenda, let's say, can use AI and generate a lot of run-of-the-mill, normal solid B work. I think the opportunity is to keep the human in, and then it will start to differentiate you from everybody else who's just using AI. You can use AI as an assistant, but keep the human engaged and just creatively on fire. And I think that it will continue to push beyond everybody else who's using the AI stuff only in a silo as the only thing that's expressing for them.
I love this. I want to be a little bit cheeky because I hear this a lot. We want to write more human, we're human to human. I'm hearing this a lot, especially, like I said, we're in the B2B tech space. It's just so mechanical, and this is like really a theme, right? What does it mean to be human?
Oh, that's like so philosophical. I feel like I need to like wrap back into my liberal studies here, bring in some like, I don't know, Aristotle and Plutarch or whatever. I mean, I guess this is the playwright in me. It's to write how you talk. I mean, definitely like with technical content, you have to be long form, but like there is a difference between me writing a dialogue versus long form narrative paragraph. And to me, it's like up your dialogue. Like have a header that sounds like dialogue that you walked on the street, like, hey, you want to learn something new? Register for this. Like that there's a component of we are just dialoguing at each other, and it should not be, unless that's the style of your brand. There's definitely like formal brands, which it's prestige, it's elegance. But even then you have to talk elegantly with prestige. It's just dialogue it up. It's also realizing that I think the other thing is, again, this goes back to theater. Everybody wants something and everyone's trying their best and everyone wants a better day. So never forgetting the human relationship. I mean, the product you're making is there to solve someone's problem. Our lives would be so much better if we had less problems. Don't forget that this is a human exchange that's happening through innovation, is what a product is. From everything we buy it for a reason, and it's to make our lives better or easier or safer. And don't forget that this is a human to human transaction, and we're just trying to make our days better with each other.
Yeah, that's a good answer without going into philosophy too much.
So I still have, what is it, critical theory since Plato. I got it in my bookcase. It's a huge book from undergrad, so I'm ready, man. It's marked up. Let's go.
This will be a separate podcast. We'll just talk about being human. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Angela, just to put a bow to this topic of AI, I know for conceptualizing it, it's great for, like you said, potentially being an assistant, maybe editing, maybe getting ideas of what not to do. These are all great things. Is there a way you can use AI for scaling your brand voice once you have that dialed in between you and the machine, so to speak, like for dissemination, right? How do you ensure consistency of brand voice? Do you have any tips for that?
I don't know. It's really, that's a tough one. I'm trying to figure that out right now. I mean, definitely with like tools like Grammarly, which has some Gen AI capabilities, but in general, it is just AI. I mean, I think putting in best practices, things that you already know, like we never say this word, we always say this word, and it will act as a smart editor for anybody who, is plugged into Grammarly with work. I do keep a do not use and do use list as I learn them, things that we know we want to do and not do. I'm assuming that when we think of the Gen AI component, that the future will be in how to create the perfect prompt that somehow provides the right character direction for the system. It's not working yet. Again, I mentioned the wrenches, like lots of exclamation points and wrenches showed up. And I hate, like, why do I need 3 exclamation points in an email header? That makes no sense to me. I feel like we're not that excited. I mean, we are, but not like that. So I'm assuming that at some point, as people start to track prompts, I think that's going to become a thing. Like, what was a successful prompt? Archive it. And then having that as also a branding resource to anybody who's creating, like, these are the right prompts. This will get you in the world. That's where I think it's going. But at the moment, it's just tracking best practices and loading those AI tools that you have that track that. Again, Grammarly is a great one for us, and put it in the brand book. That's helpful.
Awesome, Angela. Well, that's super helpful. Angela, this was really fun. We need to do this again.
I know. Thank you for having me on. I'll just brush up on my philosophy.
And Angela, if folks want to learn more about you and, what you do, where should they go?
Yeah, you can go to my website, angelasantillo.com. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram and it's private, but if you feel the need, fully go there, Ann Santillo. I will let you in. It's just a bunch of pictures of me writing and my cats, but it's exciting, and theater work that I do in the city. So yeah, follow me in those 2 places.
Yeah, and just mention you heard of Angela through the podcast, so she's sure to really let you in.
For sure. I'll be like, let's go. Welcome to the world of Angela.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Angela. And yeah, this was a real pleasure.
Of course. Thanks for having me.